I'm going to ask a couple questions to start with, and you don't answer the questions. I just want you to internalize on this and answer the question to yourself. And this is to make a point more than anything. How many of you feel comfortable making an irrigation management recommendation? And don't raise your hand, just think about what your answer would be. And then on the contrary, I want to ask, how many of you think would be comfortable making an irrigation management strategy? I'm talking about season long, where you work with the grower season long. He manages irrigation resources. How many of you are comfortable doing that? Well, I'm going to confess to you that it was not maybe 8 years ago that I felt I had gained enough background information and enough knowledge to work with growers on a season-long basis. I could always tell them, go ahead and irrigate it. The cotton's in bloom, that's kind of a no-brainer. The corn's pollinating, it'd be a good time to irrigate. But when you start considering managing irrigation resources, that's really where I think that you and I come in. And if you want to make a footprint up here as a consultant, this is what you're going to need to start doing. When I became a consultant in the High Plains in 1980, and I remember that a lot of us used to sit around and talk at meetings like this and say, how do you do this? How many bowls do you count? What is your threshold on bollworm and cotton? And how do you scout for southwestern corn borer? We just had these roundtable discussions, and really I probably learned consulting from many of you. And so this is how I fashioned my presentation today. I'm sure there's many good irrigators out here, but I'm going to make the assumption that there are some things that probably haven't clicked with you yet on how to make irrigation management decisions, because they didn't click with me until I got into the process. And so if you'll just bear with me. Okay. Step one is to overcome fear and self-doubt. It's easy to assume that, that it's going to be hard for me to manage all this for this grower, but absolutely you can do it. But you're going to have to learn how to manage based on potential evapotranspiration. And so that is going to need to be your benchmark. And once you start managing cotton based on potential evapotranspiration or corn, and you start following these trends, your confidence will increase. You need to learn the fundamentals and undeniable truths, and many of those I'm going to talk about today. I can't talk about all of them, but there are some very basic fundamentals that growers constantly have problems with, and you've got to embed these in your mind and say, this is an undeniable truth, and no matter what you say or what you did 20 years ago, this is the way it's going to be, okay? Because you're going to find yourself having to break through some barriers with some growers. You need to accept the way. There is no better way to learn irrigation management than except through learning potential evapotranspiration. It sounds like a big task, but it's really not. And I'm going to try to cover as many bases today as I possibly can. When you start, what I would recommend you do is start very slow. Find one grower and take a half a pivot of cotton and say, team up with him and say, I want to manage irrigation resources deal on this half pivot of cotton, and work with him on that particular year. And if you do that 1 year, I'll guarantee you're going to have a lot of confidence in the second year if you will just apply some of these steps. And then when in doubt, you don't have all the answers, just apply logic, good agronomic logic. And I'm going to be saying some things today that may not apply to everybody's particular area. And if it's contrary to what you know as being a fact, just apply logic, disregard what I say, and do what you know is right. Okay. So I'm going to ask a question, and this is going to be a basic question on, how much water, if someone came up to you and said, how much water does it take to make a bale per acre? Can anybody specifically answer that? I'm talking about 2015. How much water is it going to take? Well, you'd probably say, I need to know the planting date, and I need to know how much rainfall or irrigation, or at what crop developmental stage, how much would be applied. And I would need to have weather data, and I would need to know what the soil water holding capacity is. I'd need to know all these things in order to make a decision on how much water it takes to make a bale per acre. Well, if you look at that, what you have to know is all the information that goes into developing potential evapotranspiration tables on these predictive models. Our local scientists developed this. We have the best PET network anywhere in the United States. And so your first task is you've got to trust in the system and be familiar with it. And I'm going to show you how I would recommend you start on that. Then basically, let's kind of put things in perspective. When you have a rain-fed situation or you're totally dry land, the total amount of inches of water is really unknown. You don't know what your expected yield is going to be because you don't know when it's going to rain, and your pounds of lint is extremely variable. But when you can water, let's say 30% of potential evapotranspiration, and you can do that consistently, and this is one point that I want to make. When you start working with growers, you want to maintain a certain consistent percentage of potential evapotranspiration irrigation based on your ability to irrigate. So that means that 30%, if you were irrigating at 30% and your PET table said you need to put on an inch, you would only be putting on 3/10 of an inch. That would be 30% of 100. If you follow strict PET during the critical stages, you're looking at about 9 to 12 inches of total water, and you can expect a yield of 700 to 900 pounds, and that's going to be 60 to 90 pounds per inch. When you can irrigate it, 60% of PET is 12 to 18 inches, 1,200 to 1,500 pounds of anticipated yield, 90 to 120 pounds of lint per inch of water. And then when you get to 90% of PET, you're looking at 22 to 28 inches, 1,200 to 2,000 pounds. You notice that we're right at the same level at 90% on the lower end as we are at 60%. You can actually have a decrease when you irrigate at 90% of PET, and especially if you're working in areas where I work, where we have a limited number of heat units every year, and your yield per inch goes down to 60 to 90 pounds. But the point is these numbers are fairly consistent. And so now you can correlate from year to year. If you're irrigating at 30% of PET and you get a little bit better moisture one year from rainfall, and you can jump into the 60% PET category, you can predict yields better by managing by PET than just about anything that I've ever seen. One of the fundamentals of irrigation management is more water less often is always better than less water more often. And Dr. Krieg talked about that, putting on that half inch of water, especially if you're in a broadcast spray sprinkler and you lose half of it, your potential evapotranspiration is 3/10 of an inch a day. You haven't even met the demand for that day. Also, one fundamental of irrigation, and we'll talk about it in the middle a little bit more, the more water you put on, the deeper you push it into the soil profile. And the deeper that you push it into the soil profile, the less percolation that you're going to have back up. It tends to get that water down in the root zone, just exactly what Dr. Krieg was talking about as far as, you've got to get water to the roots in order to affect yield. Wrong way. If you're going to use this system, and I'm going to warn you from the very first, everything I tell you today is going to be totally dependent on irrigation efficiency, and it's the key to managing water with PET. If you have an inefficient irrigation delivery system, this isn't going to work, and really nothing else will work because most growers don't have enough water to compensate for inefficiency. And so this is where you're going to start. If you've got a grower that's on broadcast spray, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to say, we're going to have to take this pivot and we're going to have to convert at least part of it to LIPA, or we're going to convert this pivot to LIPA irrigation. And in LIPA irrigation, as you well know, you put your water in out every other furrow as compared to broadcast spray where you distribute that water over the entire soil surface. These numbers work every time at 50% efficiency. If you put on an inch of water, you're only getting a half inch available to the crop. At 80% efficiency, you're getting 8/10 of an inch. But where you really get the big kicker out of this is when you start figuring over the course of the season, you're putting on 12 inches at 50% efficiency. That's only 6 inches of water. You're irrigating at 60% of PET, but only getting 30% of PET out of it. And at 12 inches at 80% is 9.6 pounds, 9.6 inches of useful water, which is a difference of 3.6. If we take this 80 pounds of lint per inch and multiply it times 3.6, there's 288 pounds of lint per inch. So you have a huge motivator to get these growers off these broadcast spray pivots and get them on to leaf. Just in efficiency, you've gained 288 pounds. So, you guys, you can do this. And like I said, most growers don't have enough water to compensate for an inefficient irrigation system. Way too many pivots on broadcast spray in the Texas high plains. Also, some of the LIPA nozzles you need to be aware are not all equal. I particularly like the nozzles that make a plume. If you water alternate for a LIPA, you will drive this water past this row into the dry furrow. And it will make, if you took and made a slice of this soil profile, the water plume would look like this. It would look like a balloon. Some of these bubbler nozzles that are LIPA put water so concentrated straight down that what the manufacturers don't tell you is if you're going to use that nozzle, it's designed to be used on a furrow dike system. So if your grower isn't going to furrow dike, don't put these straight down bubbler nozzles on it, get you a plume, okay? I like to evaluate soak and water run ahead of the pivot. When you start looking at this over this period of time, you can get a pretty good idea of water infiltration, how quick that water is going into the soil and how far you're pushing it. If you're pushing it too far, you're just wasting water. And these are some of the indicators you'll just kind of learn. It's kind of a by the seat of your pants type of deal. You don't push water out the bottom. A lot of you, and this is one of the fundamentals, a lot of growers that I work with, it'll rain and we'll have a pretty good soil profile. Let's say, we've got our soil profile filled up, we get a 2-inch slow rain, and nobody out there running those pivots. And all they're doing, if you take a sponge and you fill it full of water, and I carry a sponge with me to show farmers, and a bottle of water, you fill that sponge full of water, and then hold it up and pour water on it, all you're doing is drawing that water right out the bottom. You're not building reserve, you're just wasting water. And the thing about it is, and Dr. Creed pointed this out, you're pushing out, not only pushing water out the bottom, but you're pushing nitrogen out the bottom as well. Know your capacity to irrigate based on a consistent percentage of potential evapotranspiration at peak demand of the crop you are irrigating. I'll read it one more time because this is something, if you're going to get started working with growers, this is the second thing you're going to have to learn, or you're going to have to talk to the grower about. First is irrigation efficiency, but you have to know your capacity to irrigate based on consistent percentage of potential evapotranspiration at peak demand of the crop you're irrigating. Most growers don't know that, so you're going to have to help them figure it out, okay? So let's look first here at the hypothetical use curve, and this will help explain it. Dr. Creed talked about this, prior to the overlap of the row middles, the majority of your water is lost through evaporation. But as the row middles lap over, the majority of the water loss is through transpiration through the stomach. Here is a pretty good representative average of 0.3 of an inch per day. For cotton would be 0.3 of an inch per day would be your maximum evaporative demand. And so I've kind of used that figure when I'm figuring out what percentage of PET a farmer can irrigate. So we're going to remember that, okay? So here's how you determine your capacity to irrigate. and this is going to be one of the first steps when you visit with a grower. You're going to say, okay, how much water can you put on in a week? Most of my growers would irrigate on a weekly cycle because they have something on the other side or whatever. But let's say your irrigation interval is a week, or it could be 5 days or whatever it may be, okay? I like to use a week because that's about the way our growers set up. 3 to 5 days is a good cycle if you can keep it and you're not putting on too little small amounts of water. You get to 10 days and you're stretching it pretty far. And so I'm going to, for the sake of this, we're going to say that we can put on 1.25 inches of irrigation every week at peak demand. In other words, you tell that farmer, I want to know how much water you can put on when this thing is flowering, and you figure this out because I got to know that number. And then so we're going to assume peak demand is 0.3 inches per day. There's 7 days in a week, so to be at 100% of PET, we'd have to be able to put on 2.1 inches. Okay, but we can only put on 1.25 inches. We're going to divide that by 2.1, so we have the capacity to irrigate at 0.59 or 60% of PET. If you will irrigate a crop at a specific percentage of PET during that whole production cycle, I guarantee you will make much more yield than you will just putting water on willy-nilly. Okay? So this is not a water depriving program, this is a yield enhancement program. And so, anyway, we're going to talk about 59 or 60% of PET. One other question, will yields increase if you irrigate above 100% of potential evapotranspiration? Will they increase? Nope. So if it rains and you fill the profile and you put 2 more inches on it, you wasted 2 inches. If you say, I'm going to get ahead, when you're already knowing that you're needing a certain percentage of PET, and if you max out over 100, are you going to make any headway by putting on more water? No, you're just wasting water. So there are some growers in some areas that have a whole lot of water, and they can irrigate above 100% of PET, and they're wasting their money. Matter of fact, in my opinion, at 90% of PET, you can get that really, really high, knock the top out of it, yields 1 every 4 years. And then 1 out of 4 years, you're going to make 2 bales on the bottom, you're going to make 2 bales on the top, and you're only going to get lit out of the 2 bales on the bottom. And I know because I've seen this happen over and over in my area. So you have an upper end limit as a consultant not to worry about saying, no, don't put that water in if you're above 100% of PET. There are many irrigation management aids that are available, and I'm not going to go through them. It's all very good technology. The gentleman that developed the IRT technology, Dr. James Mahan, is in the audience, and he's a brilliant scientist. This is revolutionary, very good, very, very good information, and I fully support all the type of aids that you can use in irrigation management. But let me tell you, there's nothing that comes in a cardboard box that will help you understand cotton irrigation better than learning how to track daily potential evapotranspiration. You've got to learn this first. They put autopilots in airplanes, but you've got to know how to fly that airplane for that autopilot to work very well or to really give you any self-assurance. Okay, so how do you get started? You must have access to a PET network that uses local weather data. Texas Tech Mesonet stations are just fantastic. Here is the website. It's run by the Texas Alliance of Water Conservation. It's called www.tawcsolutions.org. You log on to that, you create your username and a password, and you create a few fields, and you can start, tracking PET. You must understand your capacity to irrigate. Remember, we talked about 0.3 inches a day. We're going to irrigate at 60%. You got to understand that, but you must know the soil water holding capacity of your soil type. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And your irrigation system must be efficient. So when you go to work with growers, these things are the ones that you're going to have to, work on the most. Okay, so when you look at, look at cotton use, water use curve. When you deal with water, emergence to first square, most of your water is lost through evaporation. And so these PET tables are not going to really be, in my opinion, very, very accurate, okay? So if you're working with cotton and you're starting from emergence to first square, you know, a couple days after squaring, what is going to be your guide for applying water? You're not going to track PET. I want you to know exactly where. You can track PET, but you're going to really use common sense, or you're going to use logic to irrigate that cotton from the time it emerges until the time that you get to first square. And just keep the roots in some kind of moisture. If you're probing the soil, you want to have moisture at the roots of it, okay? So really, I'm not telling you to track PET and apply from first square. And then when you get into first flower, you're going to start increasing the water use up to about 2/10 of an inch a day. And in a minute, I'm going to show you a strategy that you need to use if you're going to irrigate based on potential evapotranspiration that will hedge your bed. And so you'll need to know that strategy. But anyway, once you get into here, you know, is a place where you're going to start having to meet that evaporative demand right before first bloom. And so you're going to manage here early, just kind of by applying logic. To manage irrigation efficiently, you must understand the water holding capacity of the soil type in which the crop is being grown. I work with Coleman and Clay loams. At field capacity, there would be 4.8 inches of water per foot. 2.4 inches of it would be available to the plant, and at about 1.3 inches you initiate stress. This comes from Dr. Krieg's information, and I think it's just spot on. Okay, so let's look at this. Here's what we're going to do is we're going to consciously use the soil as to be a contributor to yield. So I'm going to just say we're going to call this an inch per foot, okay, just to make the numbers easy, okay. So we've got an inch of water per foot that could be held into the soil from the soil water moisture holding capacity. So if we have that profile reasonably filled prior to flower, we have 3 inches in the top 3 foot. That's going to be your effective rooting zone. 3 inches times 80 pounds is 240 pounds of cotton that can be generated out of that top 3 feet. And you got to look at it this way too. That extra 3 inches is hedging your bet against the 60%, because you're depriving at 40, aren't you? You're deprived. When you irrigate at 60, you're depriving that crop of 40, right? So you've got to have water in that profile, or you're going to go through real stress. You're going to go through peaks and valleys. So I'm telling you, when you begin to irrigate under PET, you're going to have water in the profile. I'm going to show you that in a second. If you don't have a soil probe, I would urge you to get one. There's the number on the screen. It's Oakfield apparatus. Here's what they look like. They're a 3-foot, 1-piece probe with a removable tip. And you can take this and stick it in the ground and pull it out 1 foot, make a ball out of the soil, figure out what percentage of moisture there is. You can go down the same hole to the second foot, the same hole to the third foot. By the way, if you get one, get the S3 wet tip. It has more relief in it. It keeps the soil from balling up on your probe. So we're going to use that probe to determine how much water we have in the profile prior to flower. If I probe it, I can tell you within a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch about how much soil that we have. So let's say we probe it, we get 0.7 inches, 0.7 inches, and 0.5 inches. We've got 1.4 inches in the top 3 foot. And you can do it pretty accurate. If you'll come to some of the field days, we'll show you how to do it. Okay? Okay, I'm good. So here's how you track PET. So you'll log on to the website, and on 7/21, we're going to actually be reading and see that we had at 100% of PET, we used, if 60% times 0.27 is 0.16. So here we are on 7/20. We're going to make an irrigation management decision. We come on 7/21, and we're actually on the 22nd because you have to wait until the 21st is over with to get your data. And we had 0.26, that's going to be equivalent to 0.32 at 60%, and we're here at 0.49 when we had 60% of this and add it to this column. This is an accumulative column. What we're doing is we're waiting, trying to decide when to irrigate. Now we're at 0.67, and then we come down here and we're at 1.22 inches, and that is significant because we said we're going to initiate irrigation at 1.25. So we're going to irrigate, right? And the PET told us how to do it. So, but we are actually reading this, we're here on the 27th. And let's say on the early morning of the 27th, which would have not been recorded on the 26th, we got 3/4 of an inch of rain. So what is our deficit? 0.64. So we don't have to irrigate. And you're not going to lose any yields. You're counting the value of the rain. If the 0.75 inches fell good and it was soaked in, you're going to count that, and you're just going to keep adding days and keep adding and keep tracking it until you finally get to the point where you put on 1.25 inches. Fella, this is just as simple as that. Okay, I know I'm running out of time. Okay, I want to show you a little bit of information. This is an old variety. I'm not here to promote cotton varieties. I worked mainly with Monsanto early on developing some of these PET data. And so this is an old variety. I intentionally picked this because it's not even grown much anymore. But this is one that we found that responded well to water at pretty well all regimes. And when I'm not trying to focus on the variety, I'm trying to focus on how water, just a little bit of water, can really affect yield, and not near as much as you thought. Remember at the first of the program, I told you that how much water does it take to make a bale per acre, and we're going to kind of answer that here. So in the rain-fed, we had no irrigation, but we had 9.4 inches of rain. Some of it was effective, and some of it wasn't. Any rain that falls during that major production after canopy closure is kind of considered effective water. It made 475 pounds of lint per acre, 50.5 pounds of lint per inch. We added 4 more inches in the 30% PET, bring us total of 13.4. Look at that, double the yield. $612, 82.9 pounds per lint. We came to the 60% PET, that was 17.4 total inches, and 1,849 pounds, that was 106.3 pounds per inch. 60 to 70% of PET in the area where I work, north of Highway 70, is about the maximum irrigation potential that you can irrigate without producing a lot of excessive green bolls in the top of the plant at harvest. So at 70 to 75% of PET, you're pushing it about as hard as you can push it. And when you go to 90% or anything above that, all you're doing is rolling the dice, and you're just hoping that you have an open fall. Okay. This is 2.8 bales, irrigated at 60% of PET. You not only condition that cotton plant to produce a more stable cotton plant as the season grows, but you can definitely make very high yield doing that. So I know it went through it pretty quick, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer it.
So Bob, at the end of that season, when you were targeting the 60%, and that was the target, at the end of the season you can actually add it all up, the rainfall and everything. How close can you typically get? You're shooting for 60, are you between 70 and 55, or is it 1 or 2% around 60?
Well, you mean as far as the maximum efficiency?
Well, when you get it all
done. When I get to the end, when just like I said early in the season, if you have rainfall that fell in March and it really didn't attribute to anything in terms of filter profile, or if it ran off, you've got to take some liberty with counting your moisture. But if you just start looking at what was effective in terms of meeting crop demand, then you can kind of run those numbers down. But my numbers here were not that far off from the total. I probably only changed it a couple inches. One other thing I want to cover real quick that I failed to talk about that you need to know is that I said I was gonna mention was this crop response on this soil moisture. I could just take 1 minute. Okay. Remember we talked about, adding that moisture, that inch per foot to use to develop, supplement your 60% of PET. If you say, when is the opportunity to do that? And this is a strategy that I use when having growers irrigate a percentage of PET. If you irrigate here, all you're doing is exposing that water to a lot of evaporation. So you're probably not going to build it in the soil from emergence to first square. If you irrigate here, you only have 1.25 inches capacity at 60% of PET, and you're going to be looking at 0.26, 0.28, 0.3. It's like being on a treadmill. You can't supply extra water into the profile and meet the demand of the crop all at the same time. So what I do is I probe the soil right in here, right after first square, maybe a week before bloom, and I will come in there and figure out and try to put 1.5 inches, put a little bit of extra water in there to try to fill that profile on LEPA, using LEPA. They do it 2 times. And so that's where you're building that profile. So when you start counting, you'll start counting your PET right here at first flower, tracking. And that's where your irrigation is based on percentage of evapotranspiration will occur. Okay. Anybody else?
What do you do about drip?
You can manage drip exactly the same way. Dr. Krug hit on that. We used to put little bitty amounts of water on there. That's definitely the wrong way to do it. I have drip on my farm, and you can manage. You just have higher efficiency with drip. And I'm not so sure that you can store as much. You can fill that profile effectively. You gotta turn it on, and I run our drip on 24-hour cycles and try to get about 3/4 of an inch or 1 inch at a time. But these micro amounts of drip are not the way to go. I don't think. Would you agree, Dr. Craig? So, but you can manage anything with PET. You can manage corn with PET. You can manage sorghum with PET. The difference between corn and cotton, is, whereas cotton, if you irrigate it above 75% of PET, you can have a yield drag. Whereas corn, that response to water is just pretty linear. And, really the more water you got. But, if you irrigate corn at above 100% of PET, you're wasting water. So, thank you very much.